All right. So tonight we're going to go back to where we were last week because I mentioned that in that passage is kind of the hint of where we were going. And that was Psalm chapter 95. This should sound familiar to you. Beginning in verse 1, come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving. Extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he has made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. And that was Yahweh or Jehovah Hosseinu, the Lord our Maker. That's what we did last week. Talked a lot about what the intimate nature of this name of God, the kind of get his hands dirty, making and forming and reforming us. But right after this, the very next verse, chapter 95, the first part of verse 7 says this, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. And so the picture, not just here in Psalm 95, but elsewhere in the scriptures, often picture God as the caretaker, particularly of people who are the flock or the people of his pasture, which brings us to one of the best known verses and passages in all of the scripture, Psalm chapter 23. The Lord is my shepherd. And this is our name for tonight. There is the Hebrew Yahweh Rohi, or sometimes you'll see it's spelled R-O-H-I. Joyce pointed out, and I neglected to remember that the God who sees is very similar, just without the apostrophe in it. And the words are related for shepherd and sees. But not. We're not going to do a lot with that tonight. The words are just related because Hebrew is that way. The actual word for shepherd is ra'ah, R-A-A-H, and how's this for a mnemonic device? I think Beth Moore said it. You can know that ra'ah talks about the ba'ahs. The Lord is my shepherd. Isn't that cute? I thought that was good. A little mnemonic device, ra'ah for ba'ah. No, not your cup of tea, Bonnie.
No.
I thought it was interesting. Stuck with me from a long time ago. I heard her say that, I believe, and so that's kind of it. So the word for shepherd is ra'ah. Here, this pronoun, possessive pronoun, my, is referenced by the ending. So it's not ra'ah, it's ro'i, which shows it's the personal pronoun, much like Hosseinu is the Lord. The new part means our. The word itself was a shortened form of that. And if you were to look up ra'ah, you would find out that in a lexicon, Brown Drivers Briggs is kind of the standard Hebrew lexicon. It means to pasture, to tend to, or to graze. Now, not to graze on, but to take to graze. And you can see very much it's a pastoral image. It's this idea. It's not necessarily one-to-one ra'ah means shepherd, but the root behind it points to the act of shepherding. So for a lot of times it is translated shepherd, but sometimes you'll see it translated to pasture, to tend to, and you can see in the word where we're going tonight, right? Now, this would be an easy one. Maybe you just say, oh, I got this. But before we go there, I think we should finish up Psalm 95, because we looked here and we saw verse 7. We have this we go back up. This is a psalm of praise. Shout to the Lord. Shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Come with thanksgiving. He's our maker. He created things. And then we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. And then there's a bit after this of a change. The second part of Psalm 95:7 says this: today, if only you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as you did that day at Massah in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years, I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray and they have not known my ways. So I declared an oath in my anger. They shall never enter my rest. And that's how the song ends. It's very much a two-part thing here. Very much, this is about kind of a God of creation and all. And the second part is a much harsher tone to it. It's almost like two different things they jam together. But it's interesting that this part falls right on the heels of this idea that he is our God, we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. Obviously, it's referencing the wilderness wanderings. Exodus 17 is where you can find Meribah and Massah. This is where the children of Israel, they've been delivered from Egypt. They've come across the Red Sea. God keeps taking care of them left and right, providing manna and different things for them. And they still grumble because now they're not just hungry, but they're thirsty. And Meribah and Massah means quarreling and grumbling. This is what they named the place where this happened as a reference to the people. And so God said through the psalmist here, don't try me. Your mom ever told you that? Don't test me, boy. Maybe that was just in my family. The idea is you're getting on my last nerve. And God here is reminding the people that are the sheep of his pasture that they need to remember what has happened in the past, that there were people that complained and that did that. And when they did that, 40 years he's angry, they go astray. So I declared an oath of my anger, they shall never enter my rest. Now, if you want to see this in the New Testament, Hebrews 3 and 4 is an extended commentary on this psalm. So we won't go through that because that's a whole different thing for another day. And it's a fascinating way to read in the New Testament how New Testament authors view and use Old Testament scriptures like this to help us understand kind of where they're coming from and how they see their history. Obviously, Hebrews written to Hebrews. We spent a lot of time in that on Sunday morning. But I think I want to highlight a few things in this because hopefully we'll come back round to some of these ideas. First of all, you notice that after he says this thing at the beginning of verse 7 about he is our God and we are the people of his pasture, and what does he want us to do? Hear his voice. So remember that. Put the little pen in that. Today, if you would hear my voice. And then he gives this warning, and he ends with this comment, in the negative, they shall never enter my rest. But if we take the implication on the positive side, we could say God is giving this warning because he wants his people to do what? Enter his rest. What is his rest? Hebrews 3 and 4 point to the ultimate rest that we have in his kingdom. But that's where it says there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. It's the Hebrews passage that deals with some of this. So that's where we start. God says, having called us or used the image that we are the people of his pasture, he says, I want you to hear my voice because I'm going to warn you. And if you don't hear my voice, you're not going to enter my rest. So that's kind of the bracket in the second half of the psalm. So, got a pen in it? Ready to move? So now we're going to go to Psalm 23, because this is kind of our name tonight. It is a well-known psalm, right? We could probably recite it together without putting it up there. Can we try that? Do you want to try that?
Depends on which version.
That's right. Depends on which version. I'm just going to... Most of us did. So this is the NIV, and it's not right, at least by my memory, to Joyce's point. This is not how I memorized it, the wording. The Lord is my shepherd. How is it supposed to go? I shall not want. I don't know what. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet or still waters. He restores, not refreshes my soul. He guides me paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley, the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It is a psalm that is well known. Probably I'm going to guess the most well-known Hebrew Bible Old Testament passage. If John 3:16 is kind of the gospel passage, this is the one. I have used this at many a funeral. It is one that shows up a lot. It's one that's often requested at funerals. And so I hope tonight as we look at it, we won't kind of have any of that negative association. I think one of the reasons we use it at funerals is because the imagery is particularly potent in what God says in that kind of middle part of it. So we're just going to walk through this together. I'm going to show you this book. You may have heard of it. Philip Keller, A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. A lot of what I'm going to say comes right out of here. Had this book for a while. It's been out for a while. This is the anniversary edition, and it was published in 1970. So there you go. 1970 was an anniversary. So how's that for a book? He also has a companion volume called A Shepherd Looks at John 10, which is where Jesus talks about the great shepherd. So it's really a fascinating book to read. You'll hear, I could just read it to you, but it would take too long. But the idea that he takes, the approach he takes is he's a shepherd. And he uses the imagery in this psalm and looks at it from the perspective of someone who spent his life being a shepherd. Now, he is a more modern shepherd than, in this case, David was. The ways of shepherding are probably a lot different today than they were back then. And certainly with the technology and kind of mass market things that we do. But nonetheless, I thought it was helpful to see. I'm not a shepherd. We had animals growing up. We had chickens, we had cows, we had horses, never had any sheep. But there's some value I think we can get out of it. So we're just going to kind of wander through it because this is our name. God reveals himself to us. And this is what I think is happening as we're going through this study together. Is we begin with kind of like the big names of God, the names that talk about his majesty and his greatness. And as we've worked our way through, both kind of in time as we've moved through the Hebrew Bible and in time as we move through the study, the names are becoming increasingly intimate. And this is certainly one of those. The Lord, our Maker, is an intimate look at a God who forms us with his hands. They should be on that table right there. And here, the Lord, our shepherd, we'll see is another picture that God is with his people. He's intimately involved in their lives. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, or I lack nothing. My favorite translation of this, and I don't remember which version it is the Lord is my shepherd, I've got everything I need. I think that summarizes better the idea because the King James, I shall not want. You got any wants? Well, we usually distinguish between wants and needs. And you can read this and use that word, which is a Old English word coming out of the 1600s, and think what this psalm says. If the Lord is your shepherd, whatever you want, he'll give you. And there's a whole strain of Christianity that definitely feels that way. That if you just believe enough or pray right, that God will give you whatever you want. You want this, you want that, you want health, wealth, and wisdom. He's at your beck and call to give it to you. But that is absolutely not what this means. The picture is maybe more akin to here, the NIV, I lack nothing. But again, I'll stick with my favorite. I've got everything I need. And this is a good thing. I think the word that we might use to describe this first part of God's shepherding us, of God's tending to us, is the word that under his care we will be content. 1 Timothy 6 talks about godliness with contentment is great gain. And you can go so far as to say, you brought nothing in this world, you're going to take nothing out. But if you have food and clothes, what more do you need? And the idea behind this is that the Lord is the shepherd. David as a shepherd, and there are shepherds scattered throughout Scripture, key people going back into Genesis. Cain and Abel, Abel's shepherd boy who brought the the fat of the flock in his offering. Shepherding was part and parcel of the people. Sheep were instrumental in the sacrificial system. So this was huge in the nation of Israel. And to be a shepherd meant that your job in caring for your sheep is to make sure they had everything they needed. That was the entirety of your job. What do they need? Well, they need to eat, right? Got to have food. Take them to pasture. They need water. Got to make sure they get enough water. They need to be protected. They have lots of predators and no natural defenses. If a coyote, if any other predator comes along in those days, the sheep, all they can do is try to run, and they're not exactly built for speed. No. Particularly as their wool gets thicker. The other thing about sheep is they're easily startled. And and they can be on edge. A herd of sheep, if one of them begins to get a sense of discomfort, it spreads very quickly through the herd, and they can begin to do all sorts of things. They are apt to injure themselves in moments of hunger, thirst, or being frightened. And so for a good shepherd, what he wants to provide for his sheep is a sense that they are cared for, they are protected, they are free from the threat of predators as much as any shepherd can, because predators are pretty doggone resourceful, that they have food and water, the things that they need for life. And if a shepherd does that, the sheep look to their shepherd and they say, I have everything I need. It's a picture of contentment. Our role in this and what we can kind of take from it as we think about the Lord as our shepherd is, can we trust him to provide everything we need?
Yes.
Okay, just check. I was going to say that should have been an easy one, right? Are there times when we feel like the provision is less than we would hope?
Yes.
Sure. Are there times when we wonder if he's going to come through? Yes. Are there times the reason we wonder is because we've done something stupid? Yes. All of those things can be true at once. But the picture of God as our shepherd is a good shepherd, the Lord who is our shepherd, and we are the people of his pasture. His job is to make sure we lack nothing that we need. We have everything we need, not as the genie in the bottle to supply all our wants. And I think of, is it Psalm 37:4? Delight yourself in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. And a lot of people take that, the genie in the bottle approach. Mm-hmm. If you delight in God, he'll give you whatever you want. I don't think that's what it says at all.
No. I think it means if you delight yourself in him, you'll be directed to what he wants you to.
Yeah, what he gives you is he directs your heart to the right desires, ultimately, which is him. I agree. It's not, here's a shortcut, here's a key to get God to do what you want. God, you're great. Now I want a Mercedes. God, you're great. Now I want whatever. No, it's, I'm delighting in you. And as I delight in you, I come to know you as my shepherd. I come to know you as my maker. I come to know you as my healer, as the God who sees, as the God who sees to it. All of the things that we've learned as Adonai, as the Almighty. And so my heart's desire are shaped toward the things that you are showing me of yourself, not toward other things. Contentment is the word that's there. And I think that one of the things that is important about following Christ and sometimes is missing in whole swaths of Christianity is this idea that God desires to tend to our souls as a shepherd tends to his sheep. God, and when we allow God to tend to our souls, this can be true. But when we decide, for whatever reason, we're not going to allow God to tend to our souls, to attend to who we are, we're going to find all sorts of things that we want. Was it Augustine that says our souls are restless until it finds its rest in thee? And that's the human heart, as we've said on Sunday, is an idol factory. And there's so many things that we will go for thinking, if I just have this or this or this or this, then I'll be content. Then, and I think the whole reality of our world that is addiction driven, as we are a consumeristic society, is part of this thinking there's something out there that I need to find that will ultimately make me content. And sometimes when I don't find it, I just want to numb myself with substances. And sometimes I just pursue it with all that I am and ultimately find it's empty. I think I've told you this before, but years ago when we were in college, Denise's sister worked with some very wealthy people. She worked for a firm that I think was bookkeeping or whatever for some very wealthy people on Palm Beach, which is kind of like the be all end all of wealth. You know, this, we're talking the names that you know, historic family wealth is on there, ridiculous amounts of wealth are on there. And one of the things that she said is she would interact with these people that have everything that you would want, the bazillion-dollar homes and every sort of accolade and award on the mantle, that have taken and done, have experienced things that we could only dream of. And they were some of the most miserable people. Their marriages were falling apart. They were dealing with all sorts of, alcohol flows freely because it just kind of numbs the emptiness that all of these things never provide. And, are there wealthy people that are content in Jesus? Absolutely. I'm not saying to be wealthy is to be discontent. I think you can be very poor and discontent. I think you can be very rich and discontent. I think you can be very poor and be absolutely content. I think you can be very wealthy and be absolutely content. It's not about how much you have. Just like you can have a very big church that's healthy and you have a very big church that's sick. A very little church that's healthy, a very little church. I mean, there's no, size is not wealth is not the determining factor. It is the allowance of God to tend to our souls. And so when we allow God to tend to our souls, we're satisfied with what he gives us. When we trust him as our shepherd, we realize it's not that we have everything, but as we look around, we think, what else do I need? I've got God. He's taking care of my needs. Now, the beautiful thing about God is he's not like a subsistence God. Like if you'll just be content, he just wants you to live hand to mouth. And no, God delights in blessing his people in various ways, material ways, joys of life. Absolutely. I bet we could go around the room. Have any of you had any really great blessings of God in your life? Of course, maybe just today. But so it's not like, okay, the way to allow God to tend is to give up everything and be a monk somewhere living on bread and water. That doesn't make you any closer to God. You can do that and be absolutely discontent. Will you allow God to tend to your soul? Will you allow God himself to satisfy you? And when you do, you find out that there is nothing that you need. You lack for nothing. You have no wants because in him you have absolutely everything you need. And so he is our shepherd. I like the next line. He makes me lie down in green pastures. I have seen a lot of sheep in my life. We went to Scotland a couple of years ago. We just booked our tickets back next year. We're very excited. Can't wait to go back next spring. We saw a lot of sheep. We were in Wales. There are more sheep than people in Wales. And I very rarely remember a sheep lying down. They were always moving. I don't know, Denise, maybe you remember, I don't know. They were always on the move. They were looking for whatever. They were following this. And so you read this and say, make a sheep lie down in green pastures. That's a pretty significant thing. And Keller brings it out in his book that there are only a very few reasons that a sheep will ever lie down. And they go back to some of the things we said before. One, they have to feel absolutely secure, no threat. And not in any surrounding sheep, no threat to them, no threat from anybody in the herd where everybody's on edge. And they have to be watered and fed. Because notice where they're lying down in what kind of pastures? Green. So if you're a sheep and you're hungry, what are you going to expect to be doing in a green pasture? Eating. But if you're in a green pasture and you're lying down,
ate all you could eat.
That's it. It's like Thanksgiving Day when you loosen the belt and there's still food on the table because later you're coming back for leftovers. Tomorrow you make it right. There's plenty there, but you've had all you can take. So you just kind of loosen the belt and turn on the football game and fall asleep on that tryptophan high, I guess, whatever it is. And so this shepherd has so cared for his sheep that the way we know they lack nothing is because they're lying down in the pastures. They're not grazing. They're not. Are you showing me pictures of sheep lying down? Hey, look, there's sheep lying down in green pastures. Is that in our book of pictures? I assume.
Yes. Sorry. I didn't have the microphone on. Yes.
It's okay. Once again, I've been proven wrong. I stand corrected. We saw plenty of sheep lying down, I guess.
Well, they were lying down in green pasture, so it's okay.
It's okay. But again, that's the point, that if the Lord is your shepherd, his sheep, they're not so desperate for food that they're eating everything they can find. They see the abundance of food around them and they know they can just rest because there's plenty. Because the shepherd has brought them to a place of abundance, a place where their needs are going to be met. And not only do we see he makes them lie down, he leads me beside quiet waters. Food and water, kind of important, right? Keller talks about, I never knew this, I thought it was interesting, that sometimes sheep that are well cared for will go a long time before they actually go to a stream or a watering hole. And one of the reasons is a good shepherd gets his sheep out in the fields early while there's still dew on the grass. And the morning dew becomes a very important source of water for the sheep. But what the shepherd also knows is if the sheep are thirsty, they will drink any bit of water they come across. That includes a rut that's been made in a field that has a little bit of rainwater or dew water collected and also has in it all manner of nastiness. They won't be discerning. If they are thirsty, they will see that dirty thing of water that might have, the runoff from the field and the waste of other sheep that have been there or any number of parasites, and they will lap it up. So a good shepherd takes them early in the morning to get the dew off the grass, but also make sure when he takes them to waters, it's good water. Quiet waters are important, back to the skittishness of sheep. If it's running water making a lot of noise, they're not going to be relaxed to do it. Another problem is one of the things that sheep have, you probably know this, is wool. And wet wool is a problem. It gets very heavy. It can throw off the whole balance of a sheep. And so a running water could splash up on them even as they're drinking and get their wool wet. So still waters, there's an old saying that still waters run deep, right? And so still water is deep and clean. And so the shepherd, again, taking care of their needs. But sometimes the sheep maybe get wet. Sometimes their wool gets too long. And the phrase that a shepherd uses is he might find a cast sheep. And a cast sheep is a sheep who somehow has fallen down and can't get up and is on its back and flailing its legs. This is a very dangerous position for a cockroach and a sheep, apparently, but nonetheless for a sheep. Because what happens is two things. Number one, gases begin to build up in their digestive tract. They're ruminants. So you've got that stuff happening and gases begin to build up. And that cuts off circulation to their limbs. And they're sheep. They panic. They don't calmly think, how can I get out of this? They just start flailing, and that just exacerbates the problem. On a particularly warm and sunny day, a sheep that's cast can die within hours. If it's rainy, if it's overcast, maybe might be a day or two there. They can get cast in a variety of ways. They can lie down in a green pasture and not see that there's a little hole behind them. And before you know it, as they relax, they just kind of roll up. And then they start flailing, and that just makes it worse. It could be their wool is heavy and dirty, wet. And there are all sorts of reasons they can be cast. That brings us to this phrase, he restores my soul. The image that Keller uses is of a cast sheep. And I think he makes some good parallels. When we get in trouble in our relationship with God, when we get a little too comfortable, have you noticed that? Everything's going good. And we just take some things for granted. And we just kind of lie down, we'll be fine. And next thing you know, we're laying on our back with our feet, just flailing away. Or, we get a little dirty. Anybody got a little dirty in your walk? Yeah, you get a little mud gets caked off. And that weighs down the wool, and before you know it, you're over it. And so the shepherd is very aware of his sheep. Jesus tells a parable of the lost sheep. And how many sheep are there? There's 100 sheep. And the shepherd notices there's one missing. That's pretty remarkable, right? I mean, if you have 100 sheep, is a lot of sheep. And to a good shepherd, even with a flock that size, will know and will consistently be counting to make sure that he knows where all 100 are. And when he realizes one is missing, his fear is this, that it's a cast sheep somewhere. Something has happened. Could be a predator, but also could be a cast sheep. And so the shepherd leaves the 99 and goes and finds the one. And the picture that Keller paints of when he would come across a cast sheep is the sheep who had wandered away, who had gotten dirty, who had fallen and can't get up, whatever it was. The shepherd goes into immediate action, and he helps the sheep get upright, but he doesn't just let it on its way. He actually physically has to hold the sheep upright, because what's happened in his limbs, the blood circulation there, as you know, ever woke up in the morning and your leg is numb? You tried to get out of bed. How does that work? Doesn't work so good. Imagine if you're four-legged and all four legs are numb. And so he has to hold the sheep up. He learns how to massage the belly of the sheep to help relieve some of the pressure of the gas that's built up, depending on how long they've been there. And he massages the limbs, the legs of the sheep, to allow the blood to begin circulating, and carefully helps it begin to take its first steps, wobbly at first until it kind of gets everything back, and then he sees it back to the rest of the flock. He refreshes, he restores. I love that. I said this before, and I heard it from Terry Lee Cobble in the Bible Project, that there's this idea sometimes, and I've probably perpetuated it times in my sermons, that God runs from our sin. But the story of the scriptures is the exact opposite. When we sin, God moves and does things to tell us not to run. And it starts out in the garden, right? Adam and Eve sinned. Does God stay in heaven and say, I'm done with them? No, he's walking in the garden looking for them. Where are you? Well, we're hiding. Why are you? Who told you you didn't have any clothes on? Well, you know the story. And then the whole sacrificial system, the whole of the law is God saying, I know you're going to sin. I know it's going to happen. And so I'm going to tell you, this is what you can do to restore our relationship. And then the picture of God as shepherd, who even as his sheep stray, goes to them. Even as they're fallen and can't get up, he goes to them and he restores them. His desire isn't just to wash his hands of us and say, go on your way. It's to pursue us. It's to restore us. And the good shepherd does that. So part of what this opening few lines talk about is the way the shepherd provides for all of our needs. And then we see the next line, he guides me along. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. That God guides, that he leads, that what he does for the sheep, a good shepherd. Hello, thank you. Just leave back there. I'll grab you. Thank you, Anita.
Sorry.
No worries. Is one of the things sheep have a tendency to do is if they're left in a pasture, they'll overgraze it. They will eat, and they will even paw at the grass that's left and dig out the roots, so that a pasture that sheep are left unattended on will become useless and barren, because they'll take every bit of life out of it. A good shepherd knows he has to guide his sheep. He has to lead them. Here it says paths of righteousness. He has to lead them to the good places. He has to navigate the different fields that he goes. He has a plan, knowing his sheep's tendency and weakness, knowing his sheep can get in a rut. Anybody ever get in a rut? Like kind of get out of the way with some things? Yeah. And he guides them along so that they can have fresh grass. They won't overgraze. So the fields behind them will still be available the next time he comes through. The next season he comes around, he guides them in paths of righteousness. And then we get to this part. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I got to look at this. I didn't look at this. Through the darkest valley and through the valley of the shadow of death are two very different images, aren't they? Nonetheless, I will fear no evil. And why will we fear no evil? The shepherd is not guiding, but he is also with him. Notice, by the way, the pronouns change. he, and then you, your rod, your staff, you, becomes personal. He's not talking about the shepherd. Now, in this moment of trial and testing and danger, he begins to talk to the shepherd. Even though I'm walking through the valley, I'm not afraid because you are with me. This more personal relationship, your rod and your staff, those kind of two implements the shepherd would have. Rod would be maybe more defensive, fending off predators. Staff, that crook stick that we think of, that he would use to sometimes pull the sheep close, to use it to separate the wool, to see if there's any problems with the skin, any disease or pest on their skin. All that. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I like that, don't you? When it's hard to rest and relax when you're surrounded by enemies. If everywhere you look, you think people are out to get you, you're probably not at ease, right? But when you're in the shepherd's hands, you're walking through the darkest valley, the valley of the shadow of death. And the picture here is predators might be hiding in cracks and crevices of these mountain passes you're going through. And so you want to know the shepherd is with you, and his rod and his staff may be the physical implements that he connects literally to his sheep, letting them know by touching them that he's right there. And he's taking them to a place that, surrounded by enemies, he's going to provide for them a place. The table may have in mind, Keller says, could be the mesas, the tables that happen naturally in nature. Sorry. Could be. We don't know. That would be a lot of times the shepherds would go to these higher grounds in the summer where it'd be a little cooler and they could take them. That could be in mind. And it would take them to a place where the places where the predators could hide, like in the valleys, there are not so many hiding places. So here I have this tableland of grass without the worry about every corner, every rock, every crevice that the predators are behind. You anoint my head with oil. This would be a reference potentially. He mentions nasal flies. Apparently, nasal flies are a problem with sheep. You ready for this? They land on the nose because it's the mucous membrane. They lay their eggs. The larvae come out, go up into the cranial cavity of the sheep, and they are driven crazy by these larvae that are in their head. They will begin to bang their heads against rocks, against trees, against the ground because of the irritation, to the point that they will injure or even kill themselves or to harm themselves where the shepherd has to put them down with these. So what the shepherd does is he takes a little mixture of oil scented with various things. And in the scriptures, it was probably olive oil with some different herbs that are there. And he would place it around the nasal cavity of the sheep. And then the flies would be repelled by the scent and couldn't kind of stay there to lay their eggs. Interesting. Another way you would use the oil is there's a skin disease that sheep would get. And the number one way they share it is sheep like to rub heads affectionately with each other. And so if I'm a sheep and I have a little bit of whatever on me and I begin to rub my head against other sheep, guess what now they've got on them? And then they rub that sheep and guess what they've got on them? And they rub that sheep and guess it's good. And so on and so on and so on. So the oil would be another way it would cover and heal. Sometimes it actually make big dipping tanks where they'd have to submerge the entire sheep's body, including their head, underwater to get the oil to penetrate the healing oils to heal this. And the last part, surely your goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The last part's great, but I like this image. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Keller talks about as he tended sheep and moved them from place to place, he could tell the difference between a good shepherd and a poor shepherd by the conditions of the fields. Good shepherd managed not just his sheep, but managed the pasture lands he would take them to. So that as he would go, he wouldn't, as we talked about before, he wouldn't let them overgraze. He wouldn't let them ruin the land so that the next season he could bring them right back. and they would be able to graze there again. And so the good shepherd would allow his sheep to eat, but not ruin, and allow their natural fertilization process to take over, so that the next year it was even a more fertile field that he brought his sheep to. If his flock grew, it could support him. And so the picture that he sees as a good shepherd, the Lord who is our shepherd, manages so that everywhere you go, you see the evidence of the management of the shepherd on his sheep, so that not just in the past, but when they come back around, there's that. And I like that. Surely goodness and mercy. But that as God shepherds us, the path behind us should be marked by his goodness and mercy. That his good shepherding, we shouldn't leave a trail of damaged relationships and angry people and people that we've hurt and used and abused behind us that are glad that we're gone. That aroma of the fragrance of Christ, as it says elsewhere, should be a part of who we are. And so in this psalm, we get this very personal image of who God is and his care for us. But we're not done. Isn't that exciting? We thought we were done, didn't you?
Now we got to about poema and poemen.
Ah, that's right. I give you shit. So we're going to do this. This is kind of fun. So just like last week, and we've talked about elsewhere, there are Hebrew words that in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, we find the Greek word. And in this case, we're going to do that. If you remember last week, our Hebrew word for make, that word, the Lord our maker, that's the equivalent of the Greek word is poema. We could saw the word poem in there, the masterpiece. Here was our scripture, Ephesians 2:10, for we are God's workmanship, or his handiwork, or his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Well, the Greek word for shepherd is this word, poimen. Does that look familiar? They share a root. I think that's fascinating. I'll just show you. It's a little different. It's Poiema, Poime, in this case, N. This is a verb form. This is a noun form of the word. And so the word for shepherd in Greek is the word poimen, which is related to the word make or do. By the way, this is the word shepherd that Luke 2. And there were shepherds living out in the field. About 20 times in the New Testament, this word shows up. I think it's pretty fascinating. And when you remember what we said, the definition of shepherd was, or ra'ah for the ba'ah, is to tend, to graze, to pasture. This idea that the shepherd, intimately involved in the life of the sheep, is trying, as we read through the whole of Psalm 23, to create a life for them that we could say is his evidence of his work in their life, his tending to them, his making of them from last week, and his tending of them this week are very much interrelated. By the way, here's an interesting kind of trivial aside just for fun. Of the 20 or so times shepherd shows up, this word poimen shows up in the New Testament. It's always translated shepherd except for once. And that's in Ephesians 4:11, where it is translated pastors. So Christ gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be pastors and teachers. So the word pastor in English comes from the word poimen in Greek, which means shepherd. And that's why sometimes we call pastors the under shepherd of a church. There's a lot of things we could say, because this idea of pastors is a whole thing in our convention right now, but we'll just leave that alone for another day for now. I think it's interesting that most of the time this word is shepherds, but here it's pastors. And one, that should give us a little bit of an idea about what pastors are to do. They're to shepherd the flock. They're to be the representative of God among his people. Christ, the head of the church, and then these leaders in the church, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, preparing God's people for works of service. And so this, you see the relationship. The idea is that because of the nurturing guidance of the shepherd, poimen, God successfully makes poema, people, into this masterpiece that he desires. And who is our ultimate shepherd? I'm glad you asked. John chapter 10, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. We know this passage. We understand it pretty well. Jesus basically grabs this image. And by the way, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, is the most direct reference, but we could go to Isaiah 49, go to Isaiah 25, we go to Jeremiah, we go to lots of places in the Old Testament where the picture of God shepherding his people, Israel, is very prominent. Psalm 23 is just kind of that poetic place that we go to that we kind of memorize. And Jesus, I think, is relying on all of that history when in John 10, he says one of the I am statements to his people, I am the good shepherd. He brings to bear all of this that they would have in their mind in the Hebrew Bible of God as shepherd, as Israel as his people, Psalm 95 that we saw. And he says, I am the physical embodiment of all of that. And notice a few verses before that, he would say this. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Remember that pin we left in Psalm 95? What does he say? Today, if you hear my voice. The picture of Psalm 95 that we've kind of taken off on today, that the Lord is our shepherd, that we connected to Psalm 23, is also very much referenced here. Notice the picture Jesus uses is his sheep know his voice. And this would be the case in his other book on John 10. Keller talks about this, and it shows up. I think it shows up in Hind's Feet, High Places, which Denise just brought a copy of again because we lost ours as well. The idea is in that day, Jesus' day and earlier, often as the sheep would be out on the field at night, they would bring them into different pens. Jesus also says he's the gate for the sheep in this, and that's important. They would bring them into pens because at night that would be a way to protect them from being out in the fields where predators are. And in the morning, as the shepherds would take their sheep out to pasture, what they would do is they would call or sing a song as they went, and their sheep would recognize their shepherd's voice. So the sheep that went with this shepherd would follow him out to this pasture, and the sheep that went with that shepherd would follow him out to that pasture. They would know and recognize exactly which of the shepherd. There are 4 or 5 shepherds that stored their sheep together, and they would just go right on out. Jesus uses that image to say, my sheep follow me because they know my voice. I know, did you know your parents' voice growing up? Let's go back. Like back in the day when you're supposed to be home before the street lights came on, and every once in a while, mom or dad would stand out on the back porch because dinner was ready, and they would just holler into the abyss, dinner's ready, get home, kids. And you would know, oh, that's my mom. I got to go. And what would happen if you didn't got to go? It'd be worse than that. You would miss dinner. That would be the best thing that could happen, depending on the mood of the mother or father that day. My granny would tell me, go cut your switch, which is just mean, but that's another story.
My mom used it.
Well, that's true too. But the idea is you're out with your friends, you hear that voice, and you know exactly who it's for, and you head home. This is not the perfect illustration, but this is the idea here. Now, just like you're out playing with your friends and you don't want to go home because you're having a good time, did anybody besides me say, oh, Mom, I didn't hear you when you called? Not because you didn't hear, but because you just didn't want to go in. Anyone?
Hey, I just made a touchdown. I want to play more.
We're in the middle of a game. We're doing something. I don't want to go.
That bell. Finally,
Remember Psalm 95. Today,
I want to eat.
if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts like you did in the wilderness at Meribah and at Massa. I hate it because what does he promise us? Rest. And I didn't put this in there, but one of the verses we've hit a lot is in Matthew Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you
Rest.
rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The promise of God is rest for his people. He says in Psalm 95 that I am your God and you are the flock of my pasture. So listen to my voice. Jesus says in John 11, my sheep know my voice. Doesn't mean they always hear it, but they know it. And be careful, because make sure when you hear a stranger's voice, you run away. It's a lot in these things that are helpful for us. And if I was summing it up here as we get kind of I think that's my last slide. Yes, it is. I would just remind us that when we talk about the Lord as our shepherd, it is a very intimate picture of God's close care for his people. But it is dependent on us finding contentment in him and heeding his voice. Because when we do, we'll find rest. And what does that look like? Lying down in green pastures, being led beside the quiet waters, and our soul is restored. I hope you know the Lord and his good, close shepherding of you. And I am done, and I will say, what do you got to add? Anything? Comments? Thoughts that came to your mind?
There's a lot about them. We're viewed as his sheep and followers. Looking at the sheep, they're not real intelligent sometimes. They tend to want to go their own way. They get led astray very easily. But listening to his voice, they know that if they get into a bad situation, I remember when my kids used to get hurt. This is bad reflection on me. When I was standing there and my wife was standing there, they would run by me and they'd go to her because they knew that protection was there, and they trusted in that. And that's where we're at as believers. You know, we have to listen. He wants to guide us the way we need to go, but we have a tendency to get astray. Go astray and do our own thing because we know best, you know, and God, you know. But it's amazing how we can relate to these kind of things and apply them to our life because we're just all like a bunch of sheep. And we tend to go where we want to go, and God has to get us corralled back where we need to be. And when things happen and problems come our way, who do we go to? We go back to that voice that we trust because that's where the protection is. And we need to realize.
What is that? Is it Isaiah? All we like sheep have gone astray. We turned each one to our own way, but the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. There we go. That's what you just said. We like to go our own way, but thanks be to God, his forgiveness is there.
We better keep our ears and listen for that voice because when you hear it, respond.
Yeah. And one of the ways it calls us is to convict us, to let us know you are off the path. The wolves are coming. All right. Good to go? No?
Just quiet, come and go. But
Right.
Pick up your cross and follow me, and if you do, your life's gonna be tough. So which one is it?
It's both. Jesus is funny that way. Deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me.
And it ain't gonna be easy.
But I'm your shepherd, so you can trust me, even when it looks like it's going to be hard, to lead you beside quiet waters, to help you lie down in green pastures. I think it's both and. And again, that's my answer to a lot of things in the Bible, both and, not either or. And we're either or people.
Seems to be.
We love either or. All right, I'm going to pray and then we'll call it a night. It's a night. Father in heaven, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you that you are the shepherd, that you in history have shown through your care of your people Israel and through the gift of Jesus, who is the good shepherd, who lays down his life for we, your sheep. That you are a gracious and compassionate, loving God, that you are a caring God, that you know our faults and our failures, that you know our tendency to wander, and yet you still make a way for us to return to you, that you do restore us and forgive us. Thank you that is the kind of shepherd that we can follow. That is the kind of shepherd who tends to us. Help us to be content in your shepherding of our lives, we would pray. Lord, bless us as well as we leave this place tonight, the rest of this week that lies before us. Keep us safe, protect us, provide for us, we pray, and bring us back together that we might worship you as your church family on Sunday. And we trust you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.